Hey everyone, I'm back again with another video, and this is another video that I wanted to talk about for a long time, and it has to do with the Yu-Gi-Oh player base growth problem, which I think is an issue that Konami has been struggling with for a lack of better words. And I think it's harder now for Yu-Gi-Oh players to get into the game, especially new players, and it's also harder for veteran players to re-enter the game for a few reasons. Reasons such as people being unaware of Yu-Gi-Oh's existence, Yu-Gi-Oh being harder to play, and high player attrition. And I'll go into more details about people being unaware of Yu-Gi-Oh's existence in the second part of this video, since I have a lot to say. And I've seen a lot of other people in the community talk about these topics, and I wanted to add my own insight and experiences, since other creators have offered valuable insight which is important to talk about, and I think these reasons are some of the primary issues that prevent the player base from growing. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So I'll start off with the issue of Yu-Gi-Oh being harder to play. If you've ever seen or played Yu-Gi-Oh in the very early days, you can recall that Yu-Gi-Oh was very basic. It was as simple as normal summoning a monster, maybe playing a spell, and setting a trap, and the concept was no more simplistic in the sense that the stronger monster pretty much beat the weaker monster. The only exceptions would be if you used a spell or trap to influence the outcome of the battle, and while it didn't happen too often in the earlier days, this spell and trap strategy eventually picked up and grew to be a mainstay in the game, especially with more frequent usage of monster effects, and that's how it is nowadays. And spell and monster effects didn't just play a more complicated role in the battle phase. These effects have become more involved in Yu-Gi-Oh! Since they can happen at almost any time in the turn, and sometimes even during your opponent's turn. This opens up a whole new horizon of interruptions, and it can lead to complicated chains which attempt to organize the order in which card effects happen or resolve. Small details such as chains are things that can really deter new players and even returning players because of how complicated they can get. But especially for new players, if you add this along with the complicated ruling discrepancies in Yu-Gi-Oh, new players may be in for a rude awakening when they find out that the cards don't exactly work in the way that they're listed on the card text. It's the same discrepancy that explains why things such as MST can't cancel out certain spell or trap effects, if you're familiar with this particular type of conundrum. And it also doesn't help that Konami doesn't have an official ruling page. And other details such as missing card timing only further throws a wrench into the situation. And again, this may not seem like an issue to the average player, but this may be a significant barrier to new players, and I do think these are all barriers that can be lessened if Konami made this more clear. This next issue relates to the previous topic that I spoke about, and it has to do with the extra deck. If you play modern Yu-Gi-Oh, it's no secret that the extra deck is vital to modern Yu-Gi-Oh combos. And while I think the additional extra deck mechanics have been positive to Yu-Gi-Oh, I can't deny that it's complicated the game, and it's definitely created a greater learning curve for new and returning players. This may not seem like an actual issue to someone like me who's comfortable playing the game, but I really saw this situation unfold when I had a sort of triple threat match between me and two other friends, where one of my friends had never played Yu-Gi-Oh, and I could tell by the look on his face that he was having trouble knowing when to play spells and knowing when or how to set traps, but especially when it came to knowing when to activate effects, and I could tell that he was completely mystified by the extra deck by the time it came to make an extra deck summon. This was a sharp contrast since we had just played Magic the Gathering, and he seemed to understand the basic premise of playing land, using mana to play something, and attacking with a creature. He was also able to understand the very conventional usage of spells in Magic the Gathering, where it often gives your creature a stat boost, destroys something, or maybe allows you to search something out. And I think the biggest thing that helped was that Magic the Gathering was far more slow-paced than Yu-Gi-Oh! And I could tell that my friend was able to take in Magic the Gathering a lot more easily since it relied on more simplistic plays like I just mentioned. However, this is not to say that Magic the Gathering can't have complicated plays. I'm just saying that Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks rely more on crazy fast-paced and complicated turns, which often involve knowing what to activate at specific times and what to search out specifically so that you can extend your combo. The point here is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks are much more fast-paced on average than Magic decks, and this is more evident if you take a look at any modern-day Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. If you can't really make a crazy search combo, or just combos in general, you'll quickly be outpaced and outplayed, and this is what I think is Magic's strong point. It allows slower paced decks to be viable, which can allow new or returning players like my friend to pick up the game a lot more quickly. I also noticed this when I first started to learn Magic the Gathering back in 2016. This is why I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links had an initial appeal to new players, casual players, and returning players. Sometimes you don't want to deeply think about the long, complicated combo sequence that you have to go through so that you can set up your desired ending board. Sometimes you just want to play a deck that makes simple plays without too much thought, and you just might want to slap down a monster, power it up, or destroy something on your opponent's side of the field, and just do battle without a complicated combo sequence. Sometimes you just want the simplicity of the good old days of Yu-Gi-Oh! However, this is not at all realistic because if you introduce a new player to a simplistic deck, they might be able to get the hang of the deck, but they will soon realize that their very basic deck doesn't really measure up with the other common modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. And if you add additional complicated card mechanics, such as pendulums, it only really creates a greater deal of confusion to the equation, especially since pendulums have had so many rule changes to their particular deck mechanic. And I often think of pendulums when I hear people claim that the new extra deck mechanics make Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot more complicated. This fast-paced nature in Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of ties into the last point that I made, and it has to do with there being a high player attrition rate. This relates because the fast-paced nature of the game is also part of the reason why the power creep is as ramped up as it is, at least from my perspective. And this does explain why so many people quit or don't even bother to pick up the game in general. And I've gone into greater detail about these specific topics in other videos, so feel free to check them out for the sake of brevity. But what I will say is that the power creep makes these crazy fast plays necessary, which makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Less simplistic and creates more of a learning curve, which may deter new or returning players. But that pretty much wraps it up for this video. And like I said, this doesn't wrap up all of my thoughts, so I'll continue this topic in the next video, where I will go into other related topics since I don't want this video to be too long. If you would like to support more content like this in the future, you can do so at my Necromancer1040 Patreon link down below. I normally post it in the description, and you can check it there along with the other cool things I normally post down below. And with that, thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for your support, and I'll catch you in the next one. Alright, take care.